It's a common scene, this guy turning up with his sleek laptop and even sleeker haircut, taking up room in the coffee shop to do whatever it is that those people do. But in the late 80s, such a sight would have carried a lot more weight, quite literally, because this is not a sewing machine. It's the Compaq Portable 386, released in 1987, with a price that could stretch to as much as £6,000 with all the optional extras, the modern day equivalent of around £16,500 or $22,000 US. It's part of a range first shipped in 1983, and it is unfair to compare it to a laptop really, because this is a luggable computer, a form factor pioneered by the Osborne 1 in 1981. We've certainly come a long way over 40 years of portable computing development, but the promises were the same. A no-compromise, cutting-edge computer that could do everything a desktop PC can do on the move. Does it deliver? Does it work? Does it need repairs? Does it make me look cooler? We'll answer all of these questions today, but first, a little bit more background from the days when mobile computing was both a marvel and a status symbol. The identity of the person in the following segment has been hidden for their protection.
What I'm about to tell you is highly classified, and I'm putting myself in a dangerous position if anyone finds out who I am, especially in the Swindon Outlet Centre where I go for discounted cutlery and bags of broken chocolates. PCBWay.com is the website they don't want you to know about. This footage, smuggled out of their factory by their sponsorship liaison officer, shows their CNC, 3D printing, and of course their world-class PCB manufacturing services, made easily accessible using their instant quotation system. Visit PCBWay.com to be in on the secret. But please don't tell them Neil sent you. Oh, PCBWay.com. Please don't hurt me.
Hello, this is the new Compaq Portable 3.
The Compaq Portable 386 is the successor to the Compaq Portable 3, a product of 5 years of evolution from the first Compaq Portable, with each decreasing in size and increasing in power. But what makes this one special is the 386 CPU. New to the scene, it was a third generation of x86 CPU, and among its many improvements, Intel took us from 16 to 32 bits. And with that came benefits such as being able to address up to 4GB of memory, a limit we wouldn't be worrying about for some decades yet.
The 386 is being hailed as a major breakthrough in personal computing. Can you give us some background on the 386 and why all the fuss?
Well, certainly. First of all, the 386 is the 32-bit generation of the 86 architecture and technology, which the 8088 generation of PCs is based on, and after that, the 286 generation of PCs is based on our 286. The 386 is a 32-bit member of the family and offers not only compatibility with those previous generations of machines, as well as a performance increment over what those machines are able to do, but offers a much richer architecture from which the software developers will be able to make a lot more things available to end users.
Compaq were quick to push the power of the 386 by releasing the first PC with one inside, the Compaq Desk Pro 386, towards the end of 1986. Having capitalised on clones of the original IBM PC, Compaq were now able to offer more powerful PCs than IBM, who chose to stick with the 286 for much longer. And this helped Compaq become an even more dominant player in the market.
These machines have been selling like hotcakes. Who is buying them and what are they using them for?
Well, Jan, they have been selling well, and a whole range of customers are finding that they meet their needs. Most of these customers are really looking for the power and performance that the 386 brings to their applications, whether they're very large spreadsheets, very large databases, or more specialized applications such as CAD CAE, network file servers, or even a small multi-user system running Xenix.
Compaq reported selling out of Desk Pros by the end of 1987 and was unable to fulfill the backlog until the middle of 1988, such was the demand. The Portable 386 would follow in 1987, making it one of, if not the first portable to utilise the chip. It's hard to verify that, but it was certainly at the bleeding edge. Its case was identical to the earlier Compaq Portable 3, which was a 286 base model, but it was a very different beast inside. Specs included a 20 MHz 386 CPU, an amber-coloured gas plasma display, up to 10 MB of memory, an optional modem, and an expansion unit with two 16-bit ISA slots and the option of a tape drive. This thing was packing a lot in. CGA graphics could be enjoyed in colour on an external monitor, and a better graphics card could be installed in the expansion unit, but the plasma display of course wouldn't take advantage of that. That was restricted to an external monitor. And it was well received. PC Computing magazine described the Compaq Portable 386 as the Mike Tyson of the transportables. Running at 20 MHz, it's about as fast as anything you could put in your desktop, they said. They described it as being well enough to take a fair amount of physical abuse, but it loses points for its overall bulk and weight and the lack of a battery option. It's just too powerful for battery technology of the day to stand a chance. Overall though, it's described as the best combination of ingredients. It's rated highly then, despite other form factors, laptops, also being available. If the Compaq suits your particular use case, for example working from office to office with a desk and a power cable ready to plug in, then it was considered a great option at the time. But what then of our own model? Stop, don't plug it in. Don't worry, this was donated by a visitor to the collective who I'm told by Holly demonstrated it powering on. I sadly wasn't in on that day, but it means I can show you the state of it here and now. The gloriously amber plasma screen comes on after a bit of a wait to perform its RAM test, and that informs us that we have a whole 2 MB present. But we get no further. If a hard disk is present, it's not finding it, and it's asking me to put a diagnostic disk in, which I don't have. So where do we go from here, I wonder? We'll need to figure that out, but let's take a look at the rest of the system. An obvious problem at first sight is this keyboard cable. Yuck, the plastics have hardened and become brittle, and it's just falling apart to reveal the shielded cable inside. The rest of the plastics on this thing though, they've held up really well. They don't feel brittle at all. It's just this cable we'll need to somehow fix. That's pretty nasty. If we flip the keyboard over, it's missing its legs, which flap out to angle the keyboard and make it more comfortable to use. Those legs are present, they've just snapped. The system isn't too filthy, but it would definitely benefit from a good wipe down and a clean up. On this side of it, we can see is a 5¼ inch floppy drive that has a 1.2 MB capacity. And there's a hard disk bay. So I'm going to see if we've got a disk in there. And the first thing I should do is back up that hard disk if it's in there. Peeking inside then, sure enough, there is a hard disk and it looks pretty original. So what I'm going to do with this is plug it into my trusty Dell Pentium 3, which I find handles older disks like this pretty well, unlike say those IDE to USB adapters. That just would be a no-go with this. And then I'll use a Clonezilla Live CD, and on booting it's showing a 112 MB Connor branded hard disk with 2 partitions on it. That's very promising indeed. And one of those partitions is called DHL Africa. And that really tallies because the donor said that this was once smuggled into Africa under the guise of it being a ghetto blaster for use by courier DHL in that region. Quite a cool story behind this then. Not what you expect from a frappuccino sipping laptop man. Surprisingly, the drive held up just fine and Clonezilla took a full image, so that's preserved now and we can drop it onto a new drive when this one no longer delivers. But we're going to try and use it for as long as possible. Let's pop that back together now. And I was delighted to find that the Compaq's diagnostic disk images were on archive.org. So over now to our Commodore PC20, where I can format some floppies, and I can use the disk image tool, that's DSK image in DOS, to write those diagnostic disks. And I think when we've finished our new workshop build, I definitely need a super tower build that I can do all of these things in one unit, back up old hard disks, write floppy disks of various sizes and capacities. Maybe that would make for a good video, and if you're interested in that kind of thing, I can certainly make that in future. Anyway, the disks are good, and before we give that a go, as the lid's off, let's take a quick nosy inside the machine, shall we? Yes, let's do that. Shielding, that's it, that's what's inside. Now let's get that off, and as we undress the machine we can find there is the Intel 386DX CPU clocked at 20 MHz, and as we remove the rest of the shielding, there it is, there's the whole system board there. So the difference between a 386DX, which we have, and a 386SX is that the SX range was a cut down version with a 16-bit data bus, and by comparison when you get to the 486s, the 486DX, the DX meant it had a maths coprocessor built in and the SX didn't. And that's why our 386DX is flanked by an empty socket for a maths coprocessor, should you want to upgrade it. Now we already know that we've got 2 megs of RAM from the boot up, and that's here. A sizable chunk of memory for the period, but it may have been upgraded later, I don't know. The system ROMs are dated 1982 to 88 and 89, indicating that this example perhaps came out a couple of years after the initial release. And I like how they have 7000 logic hidden under the ROM sockets. They're really squeezing everything they can into the limited space that they have. This cable runs down to the plasma display controller, I believe, and I've got no need to be pulling that apart today. Over here is our power connector. And externally, we are given a parallel, serial and a video output port as standard. It's a very clean example with no dust at all in here, but you can't open up a machine of this vintage without finding at least 1 or 2 sacrifices that took place over the years. Perhaps we've inadvertently imported an African paper wasp. Kind of looks like one. Now my suspicions of this being a later release have been confirmed by a date stamp on the back of the lid. It's dated February 1989. So by then it would have been facing more competition from laptops, but it's still a solid specification for the day. Let's get back on track though and see if we can get that hard disk booting up. So I'll put the lid back on using these enormously long screws. It's almost like pinning the walls of a building together, putting this back together. And then I put in the diagnostic disc and I fired it up to get a blinking cursor and not very much else. Is it the disc or the disk drive that's the problem here? So I instead tried to boot with a basic MS-DOS bootable system disk, and that did work. So we know our floppy drive is good. And then when I put in the diagnostic disk, I could just run the setup executable from it. So the problem was just that the floppy disk images were not bootable. Once I'm into the settings, I didn't really have to change anything. It's all auto-detected. So quite why it wouldn't boot the hard disk automatically is annoying. But all I did was press save and then it rebooted and then it boots from the hard disk and it works. And it drops us into an applications menu, which we will explore. But first I went looking for secrets. Now my first issue when using this was that the spacebar is very temperamental, ignoring every other press, which got annoying quickly. But I did find this. The 1987 Mirrorsoft published version of Tetris, long before the Game Boy existed, which propelled that to fame. And it was great to try it out on that amber screen. What really surprised me about the display was the lack of ghosting. This feels like a really top-notch display for the period. I know it's not a games machine, but fast movement really showed off the capabilities of the display. And Tetris has a wonderful boss key. Hit escape, and a fake spreadsheet appears on the screen. I'm hard at work here, boss. Of course I need a £6,000 computer. Hard at work getting a high score, more like. Haha, you mug. Oh, he's coming back. I also found Cyrus on the hard drive. That's a 1985 chess game, which beat me badly. But let's get serious now with Lotus 123. And that does tell me when we fire it up that it's licensed to DHL Africa Limited, tallying with the history we've been told about it. I know it's just a courier, but it kind of feels like it's been used for spycraft or something more exciting than Lotus 123. Didn't James Bond have a Lotus? Although there are very few files on this hard drive, it's obviously been cleaned up or files were saved to floppy disk. One I could find, well, I'll read it. Dear Mike, I'm sorry the paper is too thin. Apart from folding it over, I cannot think of anything else to do. Lots of love anyway. Well, I hope you got your paper situation sorted, Mike. Or maybe it's code. Maybe it's a message between spies. That's it, surely. In WordStar 2000, I found some coursework about counting cars and measuring traffic. Yeah, okay, I can only stretch the spy story so far. But this machine does hold one big secret that I've yet to unlock. And if the donor is watching this, please, please, please get in touch because the contact email we have is not reaching you. I really want to know the answer to this. When I run fdisk to check the drive partitions, DOS is only using 30 megs and there's a whole other 73 meg partition named Xenix. Now Xenix is Microsoft's short-lived Unix operating system. So there's a whole other operating system on here that I can't get into, either with a Xenix recovery disk or by making that partition active. I've tried all sorts and I cannot get into it. Does it contain the answer to Mike's paper folding problems? Or was the previous owner just trying out Xenix in the modern day? Either way, please get in touch and let me know if I need to investigate that further. Maybe we can find all of DHL's secrets that were smuggled into Africa. Let's restore the tatty bits on the system now, starting with that nasty keyboard cable. We're going to want to replace it, and we're going to make sure that the new one is
cuddly waddly,
just like the old one. Thank you, Dave. We also need to fix the broken legs on the keyboard. Let's pop it open. This end of the cable comprises of 4 wires soldered to the board, and the shielding is grounded, and there's a zip tie providing cable strain relief. Simple enough. So let's get access to that PCB by carefully unscrewing from the plastic standoffs, which again have stayed in one piece, which is great news. They're often very brittle. You never quite know how they'll react. That's our keyboard's PCB then, and it is fairly clean, especially for a keyboard. But looking at our intermittent spacebar problem, I can see corrosion on the spacebar switch, which could be affecting continuity, or it could just be causing poor contact from the key plunger itself, because that corrosion is slightly raised on an otherwise flat surface. Here's the underside of the keys, and you can see it's a bunch of conductive discs which close those switches, and each disc has a foam backing to give it a nice feel. Once again, surprisingly clean, no hairs, no biscuit crumbs, and thankfully the foam hasn't deteriorated either. This is in really good condition. My next concern then was how to strip the machine down so I could desolder the other end of the keyboard cable. So I started looking for a service manual or an exploded diagram, and I soon discovered it's just a 5-pin DIN connector. You give it a yank and out it comes. How convenient is that? So if you really wanted to, you could have an external monitor next to this and a full-size keyboard with a numpad. If that was going to be on your desk for a while, then it was a perfectly good desktop replacement.
cuddly waddly.
Cables with a DIN connector, they're not so common these days, so we're going to have to make our own. So first of all, I beeped out the cable so I know how to connect a replacement up. Not too tricky with so few wires in there. And then I desoldered the old cable, cleared the holes, and cleaned it all up ready for the new one. I also took the opportunity to scrub the spacebar switch with IPA and a cotton bud, and that corrosion came away nicely. And I couldn't find any continuity problems across the board. To replace the cable then, this is a fun bit. I wound our old one around a bar just to see how much coiled cable we need exactly, as it has to fit inside the case and allow the case to close up. Then I took my replacement cable, cut it to length, and I'm coiling it up to the same length as the original as tightly as possible around our metal bar. And that bar gives us just the right coil diameter, so it's really useful for the task. And I'll use a bit of tape to stop it from uncurling itself. There we go. Nice and
cuddly waddly.
Next, we fill the bowl with nearly boiling water. I just added a splash of cold to take the edge off of it and make sure that the cable is fully submerged, which I did for 30 minutes. Now you'll find a lot of tutorials about doing this. I've seen people using water, I've seen people using hot air guns, doing it with water from the kettle, doing it on the stove so it's constantly boiling. I was a bit worried about melting things, so I did it this way. My preference is hot water simply because there's a nice even heat distribution around the whole thing, as opposed to a hot air gun, which I just don't trust myself not overheating one area. And a shout out goes out to Silvertron's Bits and Bytes channel, where I saw him using the water method for his Compaq Portable. So that was sort of the tip off that made me go down this route. So thank you for that. 30 minutes later, I then plunged the cable into an icy cold tub of water. I left it in there for 15 minutes to completely cool off and stop cooking. And then when we take it out, it is a lovely
Cuddly waddly.
cable. So a touch of soldering to get that in there and some strain relief later, and we can test it out. Not only does it look good and work well, our spacebar now doesn't miss a beat at all. I can screw this back together in working order, and that makes me extremely happy. On the flip side, we've got our legs here that we now need to reattach. The plastics have snapped off of them, so that won't stay in place. Replacing the missing plastic with something durable enough to function mechanically would be very difficult using plastic. A whole 3D replacement is an option, but let's try and use the original part if we can. So I dug out a brass nail of the same diameter of the missing plastic. It's a bit of an experiment, but I thought it was worth a go. With some solder on the tip of my iron to help get the heat into that nail, I warmed it and I slowly plunged it into the plastic. I did this on both legs. There they are. Then I marked the length and snipped them down to size, and I filed it down a little bit just to smooth things off. And there is no movement at all. Those little pins are solidly in that plastic. I could then pop the leg into its place . And it's perfect. That's worked out really well. It's a durable, fully functional leg. And as you can see, well, you can barely see the repair because it's tucked away inside the case. I'd call that a success. I'm so happy with that. Let's do the other one then and pop that in. And that's a happy keyboard, ready for action again. And hopefully I won't be getting RSI with it. Now I can prop it up at an angle. The last thing I wanted to do was give the whole machine a fingertip clean to make sure it looks as close to brand new as possible. And then I'll be ready to be the alpha laptop user at the local Starbucks. It looks cool, doesn't it? That keyboard cable sits neatly in the tray as it should. It all closes up and fits that cable in there. And looking like a new system, it has a gravitas to it that a laptop of the same era just doesn't carry. I don't feel scared that bits of it are going to break off or frustrated by a ghosty display. It's a serious machine that has the power to get things done, complemented by software like Lotus 123 that can harness that 386 power. For those who could afford it, it would have made working from home in the 80s and early 90s possible without compromising on power. It is the pinnacle of what the luggable form factor could be. Well, nearly, because they did follow it up with a 486 variant and beyond. But we're getting to the pinnacle before luggables concede to the laptop in the 90s. And I just love this little snapshot into computing history. The amber gas plasma display seems as vibrant as the day it was made. And while I won't be doing my accounts on this thing in the modern day, I wonder if we might add a few text adventures to that startup menu for visitors to try out and see how easy on the eye it is. The mystery of Xenix remains, however. What else is hidden on this machine, and how can we go about unlocking those mysteries? If the donor gets in touch, or if you have any hints to help me with that, please do let me know. But until next time, thank you for watching this Tech Nibble on the Compaq Portable 386. Please subscribe, check out our Patreon if you'd like to support us, and leave room for others when you take your laptop to the coffee shop, especially if you're eating a
Cuddly waddly.
See you next time.
Conley Waddley. 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 Portable Bugler Alarm.